Hello and welcome to our second lesson in Module 1, but the first lesson where we really get working with our hands, where we're doing more than reflecting. I will outline for you what materials you'll need to optimize your time in this lesson, much of which you probably already have ready and waiting to be optimized. So let's get started. In this lesson, you're going to learn how this essential foundation will help guide you for the rest of your flipping journey. And then also the big one is how to create your flipped calendar for the entire school year. And I kind of teased this early on, and I'm really excited to get started. So the materials you will need include a blank calendar. For me, I like to use a paper calendar, and then I finalize all the details on a Google Calendar. So it's a blank calendar, whether that's paper or your favorite calendar app. However, you should do whatever works for you. You do not need to reinvent the wheel here as far as your calendar process goes. I did link a blank, very plain, but gets the job done calendar in this lesson's walkthrough linked below this video. That way you can quickly print and get to work on this lesson's take action piece. Next, you'll need your curriculum map or the equivalent of your course's curriculum map. This does not have to be anything fancy, but the basics that you need is a list of all standards, or at minimum, the units of study broken down into certain time frames. When I flipped my course in AP Psychology, I was lucky to already have a curriculum map as well as a recommendation from College Board, that's the company who runs all AP curriculum, on how much of the test would be dedicated to each unit. So then I use that to determine how much time I would spend on each unit. And that's ultimately what you want, right? You want to establish how long are you spending on each unit. Lastly, you'll need your course's standards. Now that is probably in your curriculum map if you have one. However, you need to determine if those standards look the way you want them to, and that they will be both digestible for students to easily understand, as well as easy for you to use to guide the topics and eventually videos you create around those standards. Let me give you an example. This is a picture of a page from the AP Psychology course description provided by College Board. I use this to both build my calendar and the unit guides that we'll discuss in the next lesson. We'll get to that soon, but for now I want to point out some key features that you want to consider finding for your own flipped course as you go to build your calendar. I won't spend much time here because for most courses nowadays, these are laid out pretty well, but there may be some details you don't have and want to pay attention to. Number 1, at the top of each unit, you'll see percentages. This is College Board telling us how much of the AP exam will be dedicated to this unit. Unfortunately, and I'm sure in your case, not all course curriculums have this plainly spelled out like this, but you probably have or can find at least a good idea of how long each unit will take based on the standards themselves or other teachers who have taught the course. I would encourage you to reach out to those teachers, whether they are in your building or your district, or maybe find a Facebook group dedicated to teachers of your course. Those can be super helpful. The second aspect is the unit overview or big standard for the entire unit. And this may, unfortunately, be all that your curriculum provides you, but I'm hoping and praying that whoever your course curriculum comes from, whether that be the state or a testing company like this one, like College Board, that they have broken this down into the more specific objectives, which is the third aspect that is necessary. I have heard these called many different things, from content elaborations to student objectives. Some of you may have some work to do here in breaking down your giant standard into more digestible student objectives. But if you have taught this course before or know anyone who has, I'm betting you have an idea of what this generally should be. These very much will guide the topics that you will make your videos on. Again, these are the digestible chunks that you think your student can handle in one class period, lesson, or in our case, video. And that brings us to our first step. So hopefully you have all those materials I laid out for you, but I'm betting that you need to do a little bit of work in order to get that last item on your materials list, the broken down topics. So the first step of this lesson will be for you to spend some time this week. I'm thinking a couple hours working it out in your mind and eventually into an outline, what your big giant standards look like in a broken down list of topics that you can then turn into videos. Let me go back to our example. In this description of what is Unit 7 for me in AP Psychology, there is a giant unit standard as well as a lengthy list of student objectives. So I went through those and established as best I could the topics that encompass those objectives nicely. Think of them almost as themes amongst your standards. So here's how it went for this particular unit. I found 3 big topics and included the standards under those, which then guided which videos I made. These 3 topics were memory, thinking, and language. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that I only made 3 videos, but this at least gave me a general framework when I went to make the videos. Long story short, my memory and thinking videos would have been way too long to encompass all of these standards that are color-coded for you in one. We'll talk about video length later. So then I broke them down a bit more. What's nice about that, though, is that essentially time guided that decision. So you don't need to spend a ton of time now analyzing how many videos you'll make or for what topics. You really just want to get the general framework here. So again, don't spend a ton of time here because in the next lesson, that's where you'll really elaborate on these. And that brings us to step 2. I'm a total organization junkie, so I love this step, but it's not just about my love of calendars. This step will really be huge for multiple reasons. It's going to guide your entire course and our entire planning process as you begin to flip, so there's no guessing on what you're making your videos on. When you go to make your videos and want to include any, quote, I can statements, or just let your students know what they'll be learning in that video, you can just copy and paste. Not to mention, if you're teaching older kiddos in the middle or high school setting, this calendar, if you build it in or eventually transfer it over to something like Google Calendar, that is then shareable with your students and totally conquers step 1 of communicating with your students about expectations in your flipped classroom, but we'll get to that later. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I am not reinventing the wheel in many of the processes that I use and am teaching in this course. My recommendation on how to plan out your calendar is the first example of that. Here it is. Plan backwards. That's nothing new. You have heard of that before, but let me talk to you about what that looks like in the flipped classroom. The first date you should plan in your calendar is the last one of the year, meaning the test or summation of your course, probably in April, May, or June. In my AP class, that was the AP Psych exam, which is in the first week of May. From there, the next thing you should indicate in your calendar are the term or semester end dates, which are also where you are probably giving semester or midterm exams in some cases, but not all. So let's put in a list what you should be working into your calendar and in what order. Again, you'll want to work backwards. Start with the huge thing, probably a test in this day and age, at the end of the course. Then think of the other significant endings, most often quarter or semester endings. You want to establish what units you want to accomplish before each term ending, then plan backwards within each term. So then within each term, you should again work backwards. Start with the end, the summative assessment at the end of the unit, your test days. Write those in pencil or write in your favorite calendar app. There are going to be dates you forget about, like in-service or professional days or holidays and even days off due to weather. It is a good idea to check out your district-wide calendar for the school and go ahead and mark which days to not plan for. Next, you need to get out the work you finished from the last couple slides, your topics. Work those in to the unit. loosely and in pencil. These are not set in stone because as you start to plan and create your flipped lessons, you'll get a better idea for how long things will take. For now, make your very educated educator guess, and never underestimate your educated educator guess, by the way. I want to recommend a couple other things to build into your calendar that are simply based on my experience and my innate hardcore drive to stick to the calendar at all cost. In some cases, I'll be honest, my obsession with the calendar is a problem. But in teaching, most of the time, it is a total strength of mine that I am proud to share with others, particularly my students, you. I recommend building one day for review before each unit test and any other larger tests. Normally, I build multiple review days, of course, for those bigger tests. This serves more as a confidence builder for your students, but also as a last draw at straws for some, and there's no shame in that. Secondly, build in one what I call remediation day per unit or test. Some years I have built in 2 of these, but it's all about what works for you and your students. On these days, students and I go over their test and their performance that they just took a day or 2 prior. We get into the nitty-gritty of the questions, testing strategies, lessons learned, and most importantly, their personal reflections on their preparation and performance. You may have some anxiety around building in these days, thinking you already struggle to get through the content. But remember, in flipping your course, you will be consolidating and freeing up a ton of class time due to your students watching videos of you deliver content, especially if students will watch those videos outside of class. Alas, if push comes to shove, these days are easy ones to cut and use for content. But I recommend making these days sacred in your course. The third item is one that many of you probably already do, and that is time at the start of your school year to introduce your course. I mention it here as you are planning out your calendar so that 1, you don't forget to write it into your calendar, and 2, because this time becomes even more important when you flip. You will be spending some intentional time introducing the flipped classroom, as well as teaching your students the process, including how to take notes. We have an entire lesson in our online course on that later in the course. So for now, just write it into the calendar. So in this lesson, you learned how this essential foundation will really help guide you for the rest of your flipping journey. Yes, the school year, but even beyond that. And then, of course, how to create your flip calendar from August to June or whatever that time frame looks like for you, and really important things that I really strongly recommend that you include. So let's talk about what are those actionable steps you can be taking. I want you to find those themes and commonalities amongst objectives that you can work into topics within each unit. Really think of those and spend some time in that area. And then create your flipped course calendar. Remember to work backwards and spend the appropriate amount of time proportionate to each standard. In our next lesson, we'll be focusing on what foundation you'll build your flipped classroom and how to go about building that strong foundation, right? So talking about what it is, but then how to build it, and that's beyond the calendar. And that sums up lesson 2. So go ahead and click and check out the next lesson that we have coming for you.